He'd activated his parachutes, but he got tangled in the trees and his body smashed against the trunks on the way down. The trees were tall and foreboding, the canopy so thick he couldn't see the sky. A glance at his cracked watch told him it was sometime after 5 in the evening. He couldn't hear the storm raging anymore. This part of Wiesen Park was completely unfamiliar to him. Other than the tall trees, uneven terrain, and rocks, he didn't see anything of note. What did one do in the event of a broken bone? A splint. Splinting would keep the bone in place and prevent further damage. All those climbing safety lessons were finally coming in handy. He looked around. The sticks were all the wrong size. He settled on the strongest-looking branch and painstakingly crawled over to it. Sharp cries of pain left his clenched jaw as aches ignited in his ribs and back. The fall must have caused more damage than he thought. Soon he could reach the stick, and after much effort, broke it in two around the size he wanted. He groaned as he pulled himself into a sitting position, leaning flush against the tree the stick had been next to. He was in the process of dragging his bag over when a sharp sound drew his eyes to the left. There, in a flannel shirt and jeans holding a long firearm, was an old woman staring down at him. Her nearly white hair was well cut and tied neatly atop her head. She had that timeless look about her, when one wasn't sure if the person they were looking at was 50 or 70. His heart skipped a beat in relief, and tears came to his eyes. "Help!" he called out. She burst into action and hurried towards him, dropping the gun feet away before dropping to her knees beside him. "What happened?" she asked, checking him, probably for an open wound. I fell, he groaned when her seeking fingers touched a sore spot on his ribs. "From the mountain." She gaped at him. "And you're still alive? You climbers never cease to amaze me." He coughed. "I'm as shocked as you are." "Oh, that cough doesn't sound good." But she gave him an encouraging smile. "My cabin is just a mile away. Reckon we can get you cleaned up and call for help." Later that night, he woke with a start. He was warm, at least. He looked around. She had settled him in the small sitting room of her cabin. The pull-out chair had been padded with pillows so he was comfortable. She'd made them a nice, warm dinner as the storm, which had returned, raged outside. That had complicated their plans to call for help. But he was doing okay, mostly. His body hurt, but again, he reminded himself, it could be worse. "Hey," she said, and he turned to see her leaning against the door that led to her room. "Can't sleep?" He nodded and swallowed. Maybe it was the peculiar placement of the light, the play of the shadows across her face. But she seemed different. "Yeah," he croaked. "Probably thunder or something." "Need some water?" she asked as she headed to the kitchen, which was only separated from where he was by a chair. "Sure," he mumbled. He raised his hand to receive the mug and winced as she helped him sit up. She helped him drink the warm water, watching till he emptied his cup. She returned it to the sink and he watched her every movement. "Did you try calling again?" Her back to him, she nodded. "It barely connected before cutting out again. I tried twice more before I fell asleep." She clenched her hands and came towards him, sitting in the chair that separated both rooms. "Do you want to listen to a story? Might help you sleep faster." What choice did he have? "Sure," he croaked, and she smiled. "Well, it starts on a day just like this one. An old witch comes across a wounded doe in the forest." She looked at him. It's been a while since anything moved across her lands, and so she was curious. She went to explore. She clasped her hands and leaned back. His body began to feel lighter as his pain slowly dissipated. Huh. The doe was innocent and trusting. She took it home to nurse back to health, wondering where its mother was. But the witch began to hear this little sound. She raised a hand to her chest and pounded it with her words. Thump-thump, thump-thump, thump-thump. Her head angled, eyes lost in thought. The witch wondered what that sound was. Her eyes turned to him. But that was the doe's heart. You see, the witch had no heart of her own. She sold hers for power long ago. So this doe's heart was the most captivating music, and the hunger grew in her. His heart rate increased ominously, and soon he found he could not move his legs. His fingers only barely. What? Shh, she whispered, having come closer to sit by his side. I haven't finished. Her hand tentatively moved into his hair, and all he could do was bend his head the other way. Soon, the witch grew more obsessed and obsessed, until she could take it no more. She had to have that heart. His hands, too, lost feeling, and soon, he couldn't even feel the hand moving through his scalp. Only his eyes moved around. And so she took a blade and carved that still beating heart out, she said, leaning closer. The doe's innocent eyes watched as the witch took it in her mouth. Just a taste, the witch said, for I must know how this music tastes. With those words, she closed her lips around that soft, still living drum and took a bite. She put her hand on his face and turned his head towards her. Her face had become more haggard. Sharp fangs gleamed in a wet mouth. Don't worry, darling. You won't feel a thing, she whispered, as she revealed a silver blade in her other hand, poised high to plunge into him.
Subscribe today, or